Everyone, and welcome to Humanity as Organism Thrives. This is Peace Week, and I'm honored to host this convergence room with Dr. Tom Acklin. And we are happy to have Brent Naseath. Funny enough, it's only when I start recording that I ask you whether I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Brent.
It's Naseath.
Naseath. Okay, here we go. Well, welcome, Brent Naseath. And this is a topic that's uncomfortable. And I know Tom and I always talk about the fact that uncomfortable conversations are good. They need to take place. And it's really how they take place that matters. And Brent and I have just been chatting about that. So I'm very excited to introduce him. Brent, since we've only just met, I'm just going to read your bio. I'm sure I'd be able to say something amazing about you once we get to know each other. Drawing on 40 years of experience in optimizing operations at some of America's foremost corporations, Brent Naseath created a viable solution to address the political divide, corruption, and the manipulative politics that plague societies of the world. This solution would result in more effective laws and policies for the people. He wrote End Politics Now as the blueprint for these changes, accompanied by a detailed execution plan. This strategy bypasses the entrenched interests of political parties and their elite sponsors, empowering citizens to actively participate in the governance and the shaping of our future. That's beautiful. And before we hand the floor over to you, Brent, Tom, is there anything that you'd like to say? We haven't heard your voice in the session.
Well, welcome and thank you in advance for very enlightening. We've had some pretty big shoes, and it's been an interesting thread. I work very strongly in the medical sovereignty, personal sovereignty conversation the past couple of years. Surprisingly, I was what I thought was politically aware, but my eyes were popped open in some pretty new ways recently, and we just finished earlier today a conversation with one of the gentlemen that we work with in South Africa, who runs a medical legal vaccine injury awareness group, and very well traveled. He's a neurosurgeon and medical legal guy as well. And we had a very interesting evolution of conversation that finished with no enemy. And God bless you. It's hard to have these conversations without demonizing somebody, right? And I have a feeling, knowing what tip of the iceberg I know about you, I have a feeling that you're gonna bring some bright light to the situation. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Shall I keep going then? Okay.
Yes, please.
Well, I am so excited to share this with you today. And to start, I'd like to say that it's a real privilege to be part of the Peace Week celebrations related to International Peace Day on Thursday. And I would like to thank Hasina Patel and Dr. Tom Acklin for being so gracious for hosting my presentation. And I'd also like to thank Ingrid Fortmeyer for all of her efforts in getting all this up, as well as Tex Albert. So my objective today is to help you have hope for your future and for actual peace. And I want to help you come into awareness about what's actually causing the political divide and our other major political problems, and then understand the solution. I want to empower each of us to have a voice in government, and I want you to care enough about our futures to do something about it. So most of the concepts that I'm going to describe may be new to you, If you run into something that you need to noodle on, hey, there's more information in my book, End Politics Now. But just to be clear, I'm not here to sell you my book, okay? Yes, it's on Amazon, but you can read it for free on my website, endpoliticsnow.com. And it contains the blueprint and an action plan for making our collaborative democracy a reality. So that's where to go to understand all the details if you have questions that I don't have time to answer, or you get stuck on something that I say. And I could certainly understand that. So my plan is to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have about 25 minutes for questions and discussion. So I'll launch. So let me start with a little story. And my wife happens to be watching this too, so she'll appreciate this. Running up to the 2020 federal elections in the US, I was like shocked at the degree of division in our country over politics. And most of the media lined up on one side or the other, and so did family and friends. I mean, people were so angry that they dropped friends who didn't agree with them and believe like they would, and they wouldn't talk to family members. People were actually attacked. It felt like the Civil War was starting all over again. It was very scary, and it still is. I was so upset that I couldn't sleep well, and I could barely focus on my work. And my wife got so tired of my ranting and complaining that she finally said, "Hey, if you're so upset, then fix it. Otherwise, shut the heck up." And thanks to her, I had an epiphany. Maybe I could solve this. After all, I was essentially a professional problem solver. I'd spent 45 years solving some of the biggest problems for some of the largest companies in the US. So I decided to give it a try. So I turned from complaining mode into problem solving mode. And my first step was to do research to find out what was really going on. I mean, we're taught in school certain things, and we hear a lot of propaganda from both the right and the left that those guys are causing it. If we get rid of those guys, no, if we just get rid of those guys, well, they're lying. But what's really causing the problems? What is the root cause? Not just the symptoms. If you spend your time trying to solve symptoms, you're pretty much wasting your time. The main problems will just recur over and over again. So I spent about 2 years reading hundreds of books and thousands of papers and articles to understand the situation. And I found that much of what we're taught about colonial history and how our government operates isn't true. In fact, I think I've got some slides here that may help all of this. So I'm going to go here and enable all of this. Let's see. I'm not quite sure how to.
Are you sharing screen?
I am. Well, I'm not sharing it yet. I needed to, just a second.
Yeah.
When it says share, I was going to share the specific screen. We'll see if this works.
Yes.
Are you seeing the full slide now or just part of it?
The full slide, the root cause of our political problems. Yeah.
Okay. So, I discovered that the root cause of the political divide and of almost all of our political problems is that the power elite monopolize control of the government through the major political parties. All right, it's working. So the power elite are those in the ultra-wealthy elite class who control governments and those who manage their corporations and the politicians who obey them. Now, I assumed up front that government processes were broken, but they're not. I mean, politicians didn't suddenly change things. Things are operating exactly the way they were designed to, which is to enable the power elite to have such control through the political parties. So I'm sorry to tell you, but it's been that way since the American Revolution. And let me give you a few quick examples to show you how things actually work, and not to the benefit of we the people, but certainly at our expense. So first, Cambridge University did a study covering a 20-year period that demonstrated that US laws and policies give the power elite and their businesses what they want and ignore the rest of us. Both political parties serve the power elite and just give us lip service so that we'll vote for their party. Second, it's no secret that the very wealthy elect the president and members of Congress by voting with their financial contributions long before we get to pick which of the two they offer us. It's called the money election. In 2020, they spent over $14 billion on the election. That's right, $14 billion on one election. About $5.7 billion was spent just on the presidential election, and about $8.7 billion was spent on the congressional seats. $2.8 billion was spent on the top 10 Senate races alone. That equates to $280 million per senator on average for those top 10 races. You don't invest that type of money in an election, plus another $3.5 billion a year in lobbying, and a lot more on think tanks and government advisory committees, unless you get a good return on your money. In other words, because of their money and power, the voices of the very few are the only ones heard in government, and our voices are ignored. Maybe that's why we're called a silent majority, because we don't have a voice in laws and policies. A third example, the political parties run the government, not the politicians. For example, whichever party has the majority of seats in each chamber of Congress chooses the majority leader in that chamber. That leader chooses the head of each committee and picks those who serve on each committee, making sure that his or her party has the majority in every committee. And the majority leaders dictate how their party's politicians vote. Therefore, the political party tells the majority leader what laws they want and how they want them worded, and then those leaders tell the committees what to do, and they tell their party members how to vote. The whole idea of developing solutions to issues by discussion in a committee and on the floor of each chamber is an illusion, and not one that was created by accident. By the way, I learned this information from what's published by Congress itself, not from somebody else's opinion or anybody else's book. This came right out of Congress. One more example. It's really the political parties, not the president, who selects the thousands of people who run all the government departments and agencies. It's a corrupt system known as "to the victor go the spoils," where the primary qualification to be appointed to one of the 9,000 government positions is to be a good party member, to get your party into power and to do what you're told. So the political parties control the administrative decisions in the executive branch as well as the legislative decisions. Now, I'm not saying this is a conspiracy. It's simple human self-interest. They want to protect what they have and increase it as much as possible. But that doesn't make it okay. There certainly are conspiracies out there, and some have come to light recently, such as control of the press and censorship. But mostly this is simple class warfare by the most powerful in the tiny, ultra-wealthy elite class and their puppets in their businesses and government. It's just that they have the only voice and all the power, so their self-interest has dominated that of we the people since the beginning of our country. So once I knew the root cause of elite control through the political parties, I looked all around the world for solutions that could prevent such control, and could give us better laws and policies. I discovered that in every country, a few powerful elites rule the masses, regardless of the type of government that they claim to be. I also found that the few tools of democracy, such as citizens' initiatives, are really sabotaged or taken over by the political parties for their own purposes when it comes to anything important to them. On the positive side, I learned about participatory budgeting, a truly democratic process where the people decide where tax dollars are going to be spent. Now, even in Venezuela, a socialist dictatorship, in a municipality of 200,000 people where participatory budgeting was practiced, it completely ended the political divide. The people prospered more than anywhere else in every way. The gains were well documented and astonishing. Naturally, the government eliminated the program and took back control, but that's another story. Participatory budgeting has been used successfully at all levels of government, except where the government sabotaged it. I also learned that none of this was an accident. Our founding fathers were the ultra-wealthy elite of their time. They had been running the colonies for about 150 years as minor British aristocracy when they pushed the American people for an American Revolution. Later, they created the Constitution primarily to stop the rise of democracy, the voice of the people in the government in the states. The objective of the majority of delegates to the Constitutional Convention was the transfer of power from the many to the few, and that's what they accomplished. Then a year later, they formed the first political parties to cement their powers and for the two major factions of the power elites to compete with each other for power over the government and for their own benefit. And nothing has really changed since. I know this is controversial because it busts up the illusions that we've all held that we were taught in school. Especially us older people find these revelations really hard to accept. The younger people are less indoctrinated. We were raised in a system of hierarchy where we're taught to have unlimited faith and trust in those in charge, while we distrust the rest of us. We want a president who is an all-knowing, all-powerful parental figure who's going to take care of us and save us from everything and make everything all right. Well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but that's an indoctrinated illusion. With the political parties in control, that's never going to happen. Personally, I'm very glad that we liberated ourselves from Great Britain. I also feel very bad for all those who were conquered and enslaved to grow the U.S., especially the Native Americans, the Asians, and the Blacks. We need a way to govern that finds the best for everyone, not the very few, and that doesn't use extreme generalities to turn us against ourselves. So I understand why it can be hard to accept, but we need an update to the way our government works, one that protects laws, policies, and administrative decisions from being influenced by money and power, and that gives each of us a voice in government, regardless of our wealth, race, gender, or any other categorization. Now, that was the real challenge, not just how we could protect our government from outside influence and from the voice of power and money, but how could we have the very best decision makers possible? And that's when I discovered certain studies and books on collective intelligence. It turns out that a very large group of diverse, independent people with many perspectives consistently make better decisions than the smartest and most experienced experts for complex national type issues. So even though we've been taught to trust in, not to trust in humanity, but in authority, a true democracy where every citizen has an equal voice is actually the solution to our root cause. Now, don't think of true democracy in terms of someone creating a law or initiative and everyone simply voting yay or nay that they want it or don't want it. That's the lowest form of democracy and the least effective. People tend to vote their biases, and they're easily influenced by those in power who are the most popular, or those who are the most popular when it comes to casting a yay or nay vote. Imagine instead an online procedure that leads each citizen step by step through solving one issue at a time. Citizens actually work together to solve issues, and the solutions with the most consensus or agreement bubble to the top. I call this new type of democracy a collaborative democracy. I'll give you a couple of examples. Well, I'll give you a real concrete example of it. We're going to go through exactly how it works in a minute, so you can visualize how simple and effective it'll be. But first, let's talk about how we can improve the executive branch of the government, the branch that administrates or administers the laws and runs the government, to prevent control by those with money and power. And I can hear you thinking, well, that isn't possible. But suspend that belief for a minute, because it is possible. So currently, the individual executives of each department and agency in the executive branch are appointed by the political parties. Hey, you didn't think the president actually spent all of his time appointing them, did you? The president's really just a figurehead, though he may appoint a few of his friends in the cabinet. Our first solution to eliminate the control by the political parties is to replace each of these appointed executives with an independent federal council. Each council would have 9 members, and each member would serve for 9 years. So each year, one member of the council would complete their service and be replaced by a new member chosen randomly from a pool of applicants for that council. Council members would all have an equal say and vote in council decisions. If there were a problem with any one of the council members, or the citizens recalled them, then they would be replaced by a new member selected randomly from the pool. Having a council would eliminate the biases of an individual executive, and random selection would insulate them from outside influence. Lobbying would be illegal. The president also would be replaced by a federal council, and that council would only be responsible for administration, not for making new laws through the Federal Register. Also, it would not be the commander-in-chief of the military. In case of a war, a commander-in-chief would be chosen to lead the military. That's what they do in most countries. For example, Switzerland is led by a federal council of 7 people, and they only have a commander-in-chief in times of war. By the way, did you know that Alexander Hamilton and others wanted a king to rule America? He's also the one that said the masses are asses, which kind of illustrates their general attitude towards the rest of us. But the majority of founders wanted him to be, wanted an elected king, though, and they wanted him to serve for life. And it wasn't until like 75 years ago, after FDR died in his 4th term as president, that Congress amended the Constitution to add presidential term limits. So if you think the Constitution doesn't need an update, consider that one and the other 26 that have been made, even though they make it really hard. They also wanted the president to be elected only by the elites, which is why they created the Electoral College. And that's what they got. The president of the United States actually has more power than the King of England had at the time of the Revolutionary War. Benjamin Franklin and some others, on the other hand, felt that an individual would be too easily corrupted. So they wanted a council of 3, which he called a plural executive. Switzerland has a 7-member federal council as their presidency. You want an odd number to break ties, and it seemed to me that, a term of less than 9 wouldn't have enough diversity, and more than 9 would just create too long of a term. So I chose a 9-member federal council. Now let's move on to how we would update the legislature to prevent control by the power elite, the special interests in their political parties. Instead of having 535 people who are controlled by 2 political parties to make all the laws, the people would make the laws and policies, solving one issue at a time. It would work like this. Think of each federal council. Each council has an area of responsibility that they administer. I think I got ahead of myself. Nope. Okay. Each federal council has a area that they administer. So, for example, here's a picture of the current structure of the Department of the Interior and the areas that it's responsible for down to the National Park Service. You can see that all of the executives below the president are appointed. And here's the Department of Interior in the future. Associated with each council would be a citizen governance website where the citizens would solve the issues one at a time that fall under the responsibility of that council. For example, you can see that each organization in the Department of Interior would be run by a council. Each council would be responsible for the laws under its domain. Anyone who wanted to change a law or create a new law for the National Park Service, for example, could submit a new issue on its citizen governance website and see all the issues that were listed waiting to be solved. So people could follow an issue just like they follow a page on social media. Each issue would be prioritized based on the number of people following the issue and on answers to a small number of questions on the impact of the issue. When it came time for the issue to be solved, everyone following it would be notified, and a press release would go out to the public, so anyone could participate in solving the issue who desired to do so. With about 2,500 federal councils solving 3 to 5 issues a month, we could solve about 100,000 issues a year. The government now only solves about 10,000 issues a year, including those in the Federal Register. However, it would probably be realistic to assume that we could solve 25,000 issues a year, each requiring about 2 hours per citizen who's participating. To solve 25,000 issues per year, the average citizen would need to spend 4 hours per year and participate in 2 issues. Of course, some people wouldn't want to participate in any, which means they're willing to accept the solutions of the other citizens. Otherwise, if something is important to them, they will certainly participate. Not everyone needs to participate in every issue. What's critical is that everyone has an equal opportunity to participate with an equal voice in any issue that's important to them. You can reference my book for the math, but about 16,000 people would need to participate in an issue that affects everyone to have a solution that most people would agree with. Statistically, that would represent all citizens with less than a 1% margin of error. And actually, since anyone can participate who wants to, there is no margin of error. The entire interested population is participating. What I want to do next is to show you how simple yet effective the process would be to participate. Citizens could participate using their own computer or phone, or they could use the library computer, or someone could help them if they needed it and they wanted to participate. I'm a little behind in my slides, sorry. So the entire process is based on a simple method of answering a question with a short statement and on agreeing or disagreeing with some of the statements that others have made. A company called Polis created this as a survey tool to answer a single question, but we'll use it about 14 times with different questions to guide participants to solve each issue. Polis surveys have been used all over the world, and they were used in Taiwan to solve complex problems that the government couldn't solve. With a high consensus of the people, like in many cases, over 80% of the people voted yes on the solutions. Here's what the screen would look like. It's an example from a Polis survey in Germany. At the top of the screen is a question. After reading the question, the person is presented with a statement that someone else entered to answer the question. The person can click agree or disagree, or they can skip that question. They continue to be shown more statements in random order. After they've completed 10 assessments, the Share Your Perspective text box would be enabled, allowing them to enter one or more statements of their own if they wanted. And the next button would also be enabled so they can continue with the solution process when they're ready. Assessing the statement of another person allows you to express your voice as authentically as entering your own statement. Not only that, but assessing the statements of others is a much faster way of expressing your voice than developing a new, unique statement yourself. You can express your voice by assessing 100 statements of others in a couple of minutes. My hat's off to Polis for this ingenious concept of assessing statements. The good thing is, only a limited number of unique statements can exist in response to a question, even if there were millions of participants. In polis surveys, the total number of unique statements in response to a question would often be in the low hundreds and would rarely approach 1,000. In fact, in a German survey that asks some very general questions about how society could be improved, only had about 800 unique statements, even though 34,000 people responded to the survey. And those 34,000 people also entered about 2 million assessments of those statements. So after a citizen has assessed 10 statements of other people, then they can enter their own unique statement in response to the question. But when solving national issues in Taiwan, the statements of others drew people in. So many people read and assessed 50 or 100 or more of the statements because they were curious at what other people believed. When they looked at the report of all the statements people made, where 60% or more felt the same way, most either agreed with the statement or disagreed with it. In other words, the statements were a strong consensus. But at this point, when the people in Taiwan looked at the opposing statements, they started forming new statements that could bring people together, that more people might agree with. So even just one question began to solve the problem and bring people to a consensus. However, we have a better process that I'm going to go through in just a minute. One really interesting thing is that they're also shown a graph of dots showing where each statement falls regarding agreement. So the biggest possible disagreement between people would be a 50-50 split. And the question would appear on the far right of this graph, of this dot plot. In other words, half the people agree and half the people disagree. Now, the more people agree or disagree together, the further the question would be positioned to the left, indicating more consensus. What I find interesting is that on any topic in all of the surveys, everyone is far more aligned on any issue than the political parties and the media want us to believe. When you talk about a single issue and you break it down into statements, into all of its pieces about that issue, overall, there is far more consensus than there is division, showing that the political parties emphasize the extremes to convince us that there's a division, but it's not a reality. Another interesting point in the German survey was that the statement that was agreed to the most out of 800 statements was that we need a policy for people with low and middle incomes, no rich minority politics for a rich minority. 94% of the assessments of the statement agreed with it, showing a very high consensus that policies should benefit the people in general, not the tiny wealthy minority. And that's around the world. It's happening everywhere. Okay. Now that we know what the statements, how the statement screen works, let's see how we use it in our process to solve issues. It will guide participants from their fixed positions to understanding their needs and the needs of others, to empathy for others, and to those negatively affected by the issue, then on to brainstorming ideas for solution features. Then after seeing and understanding the resulting solutions, they can give feedback on the solutions and pick the best one. And I'll go through it quickly. First, how are we doing on time? All right. First, the participant is shown the basic information about how the issue so they can understand what it's all about. Then they're asked a question like, what statement best expresses your perspective on this issue? What do you support and what do you object to regarding this issue? You know, what do you like about it? What are you afraid of? And then we get all the answers. And this question is important because it gives every participant, and it's important as the first question, because it gives every participant a voice about the issue. It allows the solution process to start where the person is. Often people find it hard to move beyond their personal perspective and bias until they've voiced it and they've been heard. Once they've been heard, had their say, then the emotional energy and the fixed attention on it is relieved and their opinions released. They become more emotionally available to listen to the perspectives and the needs of others and new information to help them move toward a solution. The issue ceases to be a nebulous emotional topic based on media headlines and perhaps a generalized anger at those people, and becomes a set of statements in which they can personally agree or disagree. It exposes them to the viewpoints of others. At the same time they express their thoughts, they read the feelings and thoughts of other people. They realize their opinion is nuanced, not black and white, and it emotionally commits them to participating further. Okay, after they finish the first question, and it's been processed, then they're asked the question, what do they need from this? And then they get to see not only realize what they need from it, but they understand what other people need from it. You go through the same process of assessing statements and so forth. And it's important because, first of all, it determines the required outcomes of the solution. So you just don't want a solution that's off of people's head. You want something that's going to solve a problem and produce certain outcomes. But most of all, it fosters empathy for the needs of the other people regarding the issue, and it puts them into problem-solving mode. So after these first two questions, then the next step is that they're each required to read at least 2 documents. And the idea is that they become informed from an authorized source. And they can review as many documents as they want. And each document would only have like not more than 3 to 5 pages. And they can download them and read them offline. So, there's no pressure about reviewing it. And after they review each document, then they go through the same statement assessment screen. And the question would ask them to judge the information and assess the statements and enter their own statements about the key information. Yeah, sorry, I get too excited. I'm getting behind. Okay. Now that they have an idea what people need and that they've become informed by the documents, now they're ready to go to the next major step in the process, step 2, where they can brainstorm solution ideas and assess the solution ideas of others. The same question assessment screen appears, asking them for features of possible solutions with one idea or feature per statement. So the question makes it clear that it's a brainstorming activity and that any feature that they contribute to the solution could be part of the potential solution assembled by the Federal Council from the statements. An area where collective intelligence shines is in collecting solution ideas from a large group. And the larger, the better. 2 heads are better than 1, and 30,000 heads are better than 2. So science and technology have advanced rapidly because people around the world contributed to solving problems through scientific journals, forums, and even social media. The opportunity to contribute to an idea that would become part of a national solution could be very exciting to people. Citizens who were engaged in the issue would likely revisit the issue frequently to see what new ideas had been submitted and to check out the consensus statements on future ideas. The consensus ideas would spark their creativity and they'd have additional ideas to submit. That way, statements would naturally get refined and gain even higher consensus, and participants would leapfrog each other to discover new and better solution features. The part of the solution process this part would be the most fun of all. People would become completely solution-oriented and cooperative, a place far from their original fixed positions. And this is where we would see that people come off their combative positions with each other, working together and enjoying it. That's why participatory budgeting eliminated the political divide there. And that's the power of a solution process like this over a simple voting process of whether you want someone else's idea to become law. Heck, we don't even have that in the US. At that point, the Federal Council and their staff would take all the consensus statements from each of the questions and use them to form possible solutions. And maybe it would have 1, 2, or maybe up to 5 solutions. And As part of the operations process, or creating the solution process, they would come up with how the funding would work. I don't know who's not muted, but if you wouldn't mind muting, that would help. As far as deciding the funding, some solutions would save money, lowering their budget, so they wouldn't need funding. In fact, it would allow citizens to help optimize the operations of some departments and lower the deficit. It's how we could all get involved in lowering the national debt and eliminating the deficit. Others wouldn't change the budget at all. Some would increase the costs and require funding to allow them to change or increase their budget. But some of that could come from their current budget by eliminating something else, or from new fees for that particular service, or from donations, or from government revenues, like they do now. My book describes the details of a procedure they could use to convert this, how they'd convert the statements, and how they'd come up with the funding and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's a really cool idea to allow some government projects to be funded by donations instead of taxes. I mean, it opens up so many possibilities. And when they get the solutions, and they'd post it on their citizen governance website, and everybody would get to review it and give their feedback on it. And then after putting in their feedback, then everybody would vote on which one they wanted the most using ranked pair voting. That's where they rank their solution in order of their preference. And then in the final step of the solution process is a judicial review. And the result of it would be a judicial opinion. And judicial opinions would be cooperative, intended to help citizens make legal governing decisions. So if a new law weren't legal, they'd know right up front, and the judicial opinion would state the reason, so the federal council could make the changes if it were possible to make the law legal. And that's how citizen governance websites would work, and how new laws and policies would be created. And we're also in the process of building a pilot version of the citizen governance website so people can use it on real problems and see how well it works. We just need enough donations to build it with enough robustness that people will have faith in it. Unfortunately, that isn't something you can just hack out, or I would have already done it myself. There's a chapter in the book on there's also a chapter in the book on managing government spending, and another one on commanding the military. And the final chapter is our grassroots strategy for adopting these changes. So really quickly, the way it works is my mind jumped ahead for a second, so I got to catch up. So we have to amend the Constitution. And, that's not an easy task, especially in the United States. It's very difficult. And the only way that we're going to get it done is to elect our own members to Congress, because the people that are there, the politicians that are there, they're certainly not going to do it. They're part of the problem. They're not going to be part of the solution. And a new political party isn't going to work because the whole system's rigged against political parties. Our only real option is to get our own candidates elected. And the only way we can really do that is with write-in candidates, where they write them in on their ballot. It works. I was actually part of a write-in campaign for Congress back in 1982 that was successful. So to amend the Constitution, we'd need to win over half the seats in 38 state legislatures and 2/3 of the seats in each chamber of Congress. I know, big deal, right? Then our elected legislators in Congress would pass the amendment, and our legislators in the states would ratify it. In case you didn't know, the president and governors have nothing to do with constitutional amendments, so they have no power there. We need about 60 million voters to do that. How do we plan to accomplish this? Is we plan to convince people to sign up on our website, endpoliticsnow.com. And when they do, we ask for their email address and their zip code. That way we know the voting district that they're in, and we know how many voters we have in each district. So when we have enough voters in all the districts, or in enough districts, that we can elect the members of Congress and state legislators that we need, then we'll notify everybody that we're ready to win and send them the names to write in and a picture of the names on the ballot for their district. And the cool thing about that is that voters can go to our website and confirm that they voted for our candidates, so we'll know how many votes they actually got in case there's any question about it. But, electing a few people here and there before that time would just be a waste of time and money. So this is kind of a stealth grassroots plan, and we just might catch the two major parties by surprise while they're fighting each other. And then after the election, they'll go, what the heck just happened? So anyway, please, that's the end. And please sign up on End Politics Now. And, so we can notify you what's going on. And even if you're not a US citizen, please sign up and we can form a coalition around the world. Because once any country in the world converts to a collaborative democracy, then others are going to follow suit. And if you sign up, we can notify you of our progress, including the pilot website. We're stronger together. So what do you think? I'm done. Any questions? And I will close my thing, stop sharing, and I can get this back, or
yeah, top center, there should be a stop share.
There it is. Thank you.
Okay.
Did you stop it?
No, I think you did.
Oh, okay. Good. So it's just me. All right.
That was amazing. And all I say is open it up. Let's open it up to everyone in the same spirit as Brent brought it, love, togetherness, and if there are a lot of questions, just be respectful of everyone's time.
Would you select the questions in comments or raised hands?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I see Tex has his hand raised.
Thank you, Brent. That's awesome. Unfortunately, I've been a bit busy in the process during your delivery as I interact with events, regarding events. Even Ben Bowler's called me twice. I need to get back to him, so I'll be leaving. There's been some good exercises here in Quebec that I've been involved in, both for a citizens constitutional assembly, and there's a model constitution that came out, a basic one at least, that came out of that. I mean, very substantial in a way in terms of exercise. The exercise there was a theatrical production made from the exercise, and it toured the 13 regions of Quebec. I mean, Quebec does not have a constitution. It's still very much disputed under which constitution that the Quebec is. I mean, we still have a deputy governor. That is representing the British monarch here. Anyway, that's one thing. Another one is I got involved with a project developing a collaborative exercise that would be online per international standards, StratML and ISO, for 24/7 interactive democracy. To ensure sustained equitable prosperity and collaboration in solidarity for the common good. So that was quite exhaustive in terms of, hundreds of pages actually, but right now it's offline because a book is being written about it and possibly published in English and French. The exercise itself was in French with a very brief summary in English. So I am very keen. I'll be subscribing. And I'd like to follow up because you're the first that I hear outside of the collaborations I've had here in Quebec. That is thinking in terms of really going towards effective participatory democracy to ensure the culture of peace and thriving ecological sustainability. And in the process, I mean, personal flourishment of everyone, not only the rich and mighty. So thank you very much. I'm in awe with what you've done.
Thank you for your comments, Tex. And that is encouraging. And a number of countries around the world are redoing their constitutions. And, you know, we just need to get the word out, and maybe we can get our first collaborative democracy going and then get it spreading around the world. Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
Anybody else?
Well, I've just been looking at this and knowing that I couldn't possibly take all of it in, and I decided to feel the experience. And what came to me is imagine starting this in a microcosm, you know, children in a certain situation, organizations, you know, run by adults as well, and starting it in the same model in different microcosms, and just letting it sort of spread. It feels like such a healthy way of interacting.
I like that. I did consider doing it like in one of the states in the US to start with, but I discounted that because it would exhaust all the effort and energy going into it in one state and take a long time. We might as well just do it federally if we're going to do it. But I really like the idea of doing it in microcosms. Thank you.
Annie, you're next.
Yeah, I have a couple of so one big thing is Hasina, I would love to have been live streaming this on Facebook or something on my Facebook page, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So please give us something where we can spread this to others. A link to, I don't know if you're making YouTube videos or what you're doing, but and then the only other thing, I'm sure you thought this out, Brent, but probably in your book and all, but you know, of course, can't stop imagining how people would try to jam up the system, you know, just put in tons of responses and all that, and just I guess there's a way to keep that kind of happening, because there's just so many hackers out there now. It just seems like it's a great tool, but there's a lot of issues. But
first of all, the website won't be will only be open to citizens who will register on it in a way that you'd register for a bank account online, for example. So hackers won't be able to access it. It'll be behind a password protected wall. And second of all, and that also means that each person's only allowed, you know, one vote, if you will, or one voice, better word. And when you enter statements, the staff of the federal council reviews all the statements. And if the statement isn't unique, and if it's, you know, insulting, combative, repetitive, or anything else, it's removed. And then the person who entered it's notified. And if somebody's trying to cause a problem like that, then their ability to participate is suspended for a short time during that process. So that is in the book. And like I said, one place I'm going to post this on my website, endpoliticsnow.com, where the book is also, that you can watch it. But thank you very much for those questions. I know there's got to be tons of questions in everybody's mind going, oh my gosh, how would they do this? How would they do this? And that's
right. I'm thinking of other ones, but I'm going to look at your book. It's awesome. Thank you so much, Brent, for your work.
Thank you.
Matthew. Let me ask Matthew.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, great ideas. I love them on the subject of a real true democratic governance. But you know, I want to make a point that in order for this idea to work, is that it has to be part of a much larger coalition or alliance. And the same goes with many, and well, all of the groups that we hear on Peace Week and everywhere else. I mean, Earthwise, all the ecological groups are all separate, and they're all trying to, you know, make themselves known. But they're never going to get anywhere unless there's an alliance, unless there's a collaborative alliance between them all. And all the spiritual groups and all the spiritual values and people with good, real, truly loving, good ideas, they have to be a part of a larger alliance too. And so really to make a difference in politics, to make a true, to make this happen and to make all these visions happen, somehow they have to all be part of a much, much, much larger alliance and coalition. And so, you know, it's great that each group, just like each ecosystem or part of an ecosystem might flourish on its own and work hard, but it has to be part of a bigger, much bigger ecosystem. And that's where power will come in, because that's the only way we're going to compete with the powers that be right now, which are huge. So, thanks.
You're absolutely right, Michael. And that's the goal. We're just getting started, but we, the people, really do have the power. We just have to get enough people going. An interesting thing is that, you know, we don't need half the people. We just need to take enough votes away from the two major parties that we win the seats, which is about 60 million people. That's a huge thing, but, you know, things like this have been done before, and it'll be done exactly like you said, is through coalitions and spreading the word and key influencers. Anybody else? We just got a couple of minutes.
No one else raised their hand, so I'll jump in and say I've read the book. It's great. Applied the process within a large global company with. See how it would work, to how people pose their answers, questions, and it was fascinating. And it was fascinating to see how different people had opinions to what I thought was a simple question that I never dreamed of. So it's exciting to get everyone's putting their voices in.
Thank you, John.
Just wanted to give a testimonial.
Yeah. So that's my oldest son, John, and he's the chief operating officer for a global company. And we had discussions about this, and that's where he found out about the Polis survey system, and he used it, you know, like 5 times in his company successfully, as he just said. So that was a fun experiment, and I appreciate you supporting me here, John.
Annie.
Well, I had one other big question, but I know we're kind of at the end of time. Are we okay to go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay. The other question, and I forget what term you used, but it's essentially, you know, that with these different, you know, issues, that there would be the information from some approved authority or whatever. You know, I think about scientific information and all that kind of thing. So you know where I'm going. Like, yeah. You know, there's all this, we don't trust it, we don't believe it, nobody believes anybody anymore. Can you give us a little snippet on that?
Yeah, so that's the idea behind people having to read at least 2 documents, and the Federal Council is in charge of screening the documents that people submit. And if somebody wants to submit a document, they can, and then it gets reviewed. And they're looking for unique data-driven information, not opinion pieces. And they're also looking for all different perspectives. So rather than censoring one half because they believe it or don't believe it, they would be publishing actual information from studies and data that was collected in the reports, and they'd be short enough reports that people could read them, and then people would read those and give their statements. So let's say that and assess the statements of others. So let's say there was a report that somebody put out that nobody agreed with. Well, that's useful too, because then we find out that 80 or 90% of the people don't think that that's true. And one of the things that we have as humans, maybe because we've been on the planet so long working together, is our ability to kind of judge things. That's why we have juries. So that's one of the great things about collective intelligence is large group of people, large groups of people are great at judging information when it's not emotionally charged propaganda, when it's actual data. And we want, data-driven decisions. So that's the idea, is to give them information from all sides, but information that's not emotionally charged, not fear-based, not, that's data-driven. I hope that answers the question. And thank you, everybody, for your questions, for coming today, for being involved, and for your interest. It's really exciting to me.
Well, Tom, would you like to close us out?
Just a pat on the back and an attaboy, and I don't often thank people for giving me extra homework, but I'm quite grateful. I'll be diving deep.
Thank you.
Looking forward to knowing you more. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Me too.
Right. We've stopped the recording.